But we're not done yet. We also have to consider connectivity. We perform the connectivity analysis in Linkage Mapper in ArcGIS. Linkage Mapper performs a least cost path analysis, creating corridors between hubs using the shortest distance possible, while also routing through areas with the highest ecosystem integrity scores based on the indicators. So how are those hubs defined? Let's start on the inland side. Within the South Atlantic geography, the inland hubs are basically large patches of areas with high ecosystem integrity scores and large patches of protected lands. To get our potential hubs, we combine the top 10% of the inland ecosystem integrity scores, which become highest priority in the blueprint, with permanently protected lands from the Nature Conservancy's Secured Lands database. But we also want our corridors to make sense beyond the South Atlantic geography, not create corridors to nowhere. So we add in areas with above average local connectedness from the Nature Conservancy's Resilient Lands project. We combine all those inputs, then keep all contiguous patches greater than 5,000 acres or 2,000 hectares. That gives us our final inland hubs. Now for the inland corridors connecting those hubs. To do a least cost path analysis, you need to define a resistance raster, a layer that determines how difficult or costly it is to move across the landscape. Within the South Atlantic boundary, resistance is based on ecosystem score. The higher the score, the easier it is for a corridor to move through that area. Outside the boundary, we again use the Nature Conservancy's local connectedness from the Resilient Lands project, where high connectedness equals low resistance. As a final step, we wanted the corridors to avoid routing through heavily urbanized areas, so we set those as the highest possible resistance. Then we run Linkage Mapper and keep the best corridors to cover the 5% of the inland South Atlantic geography allocated for the corridors class in the blueprint. Keep in mind that many of the areas identified by Linkage Mapper as good for connectivity are also good for the indicators and are already prioritized in zonation. So the corridor class only includes areas that weren't already identified as highest, high, or medium priority. We also do a connectivity analysis offshore. The marine hubs are basically large patches of areas with high ecosystem integrity scores and large estuaries. The potential hubs include the top 10% of the marine ecosystem integrity scores and all the open water estuaries. Then we again keep as final hubs all contiguous patches greater than 5,000 acres or 2,000 hectares. We wanted to encourage connectivity between all large estuaries to the highest priority marine hubs. Once again, we need to define resistance to do our least cost path analysis. In the marine environment, resistance is based on the marine and open water estuary ecosystem scores, where higher scores are lower resistance. Then we run Linkage Mapper and keep the best corridors to give us the 5% of the offshore area allocated to the marine portion of the corridor class in the blueprint. Again, only including areas not already identified as highest, high, or medium priority. So we combine the corridors with the ecosystem scores, and that gives us the blueprint.